I'm Paul Levinson, and welcome to Light On, Light Through, episode 86, Voicemail from Marshall McLuhan, August 1978. That's right, this is a very brief and special episode of Light On, Light Through, in which I'm going to play for you a voicemail that Marshall McLuhan left for me in that summer of 1978. Let me give you a little context. I first got to know Marshall McLuhan in 1977. That is, I had known his work for a few years prior to that, but I got to know him personally then when I wrote the preface to his article on laws of the media that was published in Etc. magazine in June 1977. Next year, in March 1978, I organized a tetrad conference with Marshall McLuhan at Fairleigh Dickinson University. In fact, it was a very interesting conference. The idea was that doctoral students would ask Marshall questions about his new idea. Actually, laws of the media were not just a new idea. It was something McLuhan had been working on for years, but it was new in the sense that it had just recently been put out there to the world in a series of articles, one of which was that article in Etc. magazine. That was a fine conference. Bob Bleckman, James Morris, several other people, including Eric McLuhan, were there, and we had a great time. Meanwhile, I was working on my doctoral dissertation, and I had it finished by August 1978. The title was Human Replay, A Theory of the Evolution of Media. And you know, the first thing I did with that dissertation, before I had even given the final finished version to my two astute mentors, Neil Postman and Chris Nystrom, the first thing I did was mail it up to Marshall McLuhan. And then Tina, my wife, we'd been married only 2 years then, went away on vacation for a few weeks. We had an old-fashioned, by today's standards, answering machine. It was so old-fashioned you couldn't even call in from where you are to pick up the messages. You had to actually be with the physical answering machine and hit playback. So when we came home a few weeks later, shortly before Labor Day, 1978, this is the message that was left by Marshall for me and Tina.
Hello, Paul and Tina. I'm enjoying the thesis or the dissertation very much, and have just gotten into the first 100 pages and hope to have a chat with you about it soon. All the best. Hello. Bye now.
Paul Levinson back here with you in 2011, which, by the way, has been an incredible year for McLuhan. It's the 100th anniversary, the centenary of his birth. I've had the pleasure of giving keynote addresses about McLuhan and the relevance of his work, in particular the Global Village, to the Arab Spring and more recently Occupy Wall Street. I was talking about this in Barcelona in May. Tina and I just got back from a great trip to Brussels and Copenhagen, where I gave keynotes about McLuhan. Back in February, I even gave a keynote at a small school in Brooklyn, New York, St. Francis College, about McLuhan. So to put what you just heard in a little bit more context, given the interest in McLuhan, I was especially interested in finding that voicemail or message on an answering machine, as it would have been called and was called back in the late 1970s. I hadn't heard it in years. I knew that we hadn't erased it. And Tina and I were talking about it, and just yesterday it popped up the way these things sometimes do. I've really spent a good part of my scholarly life working with McLuhan, and more than that, working with his ideas. As many of you know, in 1999, my second major nonfiction book, Digital McLuhan, was published by Routledge. And that was probably the last time I heard that voicemail from Marshall McLuhan. And truthfully, I'd been looking for it for a couple of months. Again, I knew it wasn't thrown out, but you know how these things are. It was in none of the places where I thought it was, and I was so happy to come across it yesterday. I think it's clear here in 2011 that McLuhan is more relevant than ever before. And for me, it's nice to think back about that encouragement that he gave me, being the first person to have read my doctoral dissertation. By the way, he didn't agree with everything I wrote in the dissertation. When I called him after I received that voicemail, he said to me, "You know, you're unfair to Harold Innes and me." McLuhan thought that it was not right that I called the two of them media determinists, even though I made it clear that I thought they were soft determinists, meaning that media make things possible, not hard determinists, which would be the case if I was saying that all you needed was a new medium for everything in society to change. In any case, I hope you enjoyed that voicemail. Feel free, by the way, to reproduce it, to post it wherever you like, and all I ask is that you indicate that it was voicemail that Marshall McLuhan left me, Paul Levinson, in August 1978. Meanwhile, I hope you enjoy any other episodes of Light On, Light Through. This is the 86th episode. Those of you familiar with McLuhan will recognize the terms. And you know, when I first started doing this podcast back in 2006, I wanted to indicate to everyone that the podcast would be about anything and everything. So what better title, I thought, than to call it Light On, Light Through, the two ways in which light comes to us and media come to us, to our visual senses in this world. And this podcast is therefore then the acoustic equivalent of both Light On and Light Through. And I'll be back here soon with another episode of Light On, Light Through. In the meantime, I'm Paul Levinson. Enjoy.
The Light On, Light Through podcast